I never thought an umbrella would change my life. But that's exactly what happened on that rainy afternoon in Irvine. The sky had opened up without warning, drenching everything in sight. I was tucked away in my favorite coffee shop, savoring the warmth of my latte and sketching building designs when I saw her. She burst through the door, a whirlwind of golden hair and frustration, shaking water from her coat like a disgruntled cat. Our eyes met, and I felt a jolt in my chest. Her blue eyes were piercing, even from across the room. "Gosh, I'm soaked," she exclaimed to no one in particular, running a hand through her damp locks. Before I knew what I was doing, I was on my feet, offering her my umbrella. "Here, take this. I'm Charlotte, by the way." She hesitated, then smiled. "Jamie, are you sure? Don't you need it?" I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant despite the butterflies in my stomach. "I'm here for the long haul. Go ahead." As she took the umbrella, our fingers brushed, and I swear I felt a spark. "Thanks, Charlotte, I owe you one." Little did I know how true those words would prove to be. 2 days later, I was shocked to see Jamie again, this time in my office. She strode in confidently, my umbrella in hand and a portfolio tucked under her arm. "Charlotte Davis?" she asked, though I could tell from her smirk she already knew the answer. "Jamie." I breathed, then cleared my throat. "What brings you here?" She placed my umbrella on my desk with a flourish. "Well, first, returning this. And second, I'm here to hire an architect." My eyebrows shot up. "Oh?" "I'm an interior designer," she explained, settling into the chair across from me. "I'm looking to renovate an old warehouse into my new studio. Your firm came highly recommended." I leaned forward, intrigued. "Tell me more about your vision." For the next hour, we pored over her ideas. Jamie was passionate, articulate, and had an eye for design that complemented my own aesthetic perfectly. As we talked, I found myself drawn not just to her project, but to her. The way her eyes lit up when discussing color palettes, the animated gestures she made while describing spatial layouts. It was captivating. "So, what do you think?" she asked finally, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "Would you be interested in taking on the project?" I smiled, already knowing my answer. "Absolutely. I think we could create something amazing together." The words hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility. Jamie's cheeks flushed slightly, and I felt my own warm in response. "Great," she said softly. "I look forward to working with you, Charlotte." As she gathered her things to leave, I found myself reluctant to see her go. "Wait," I blurted out. "Would you like to grab a coffee? To discuss the project further, of course." Jamie paused at the door, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I'd love to." As we walked to the coffee shop, our shoulders brushing occasionally, I knew I was in dangerous territory. This was a client, I reminded myself sternly. But as Jamie launched into a story about her latest design disaster, her laughter infectious, I couldn't help but feel that something significant had just begun. The rain had stopped, but the air was still heavy with moisture and possibility. I glanced at Jamie, admiring the way the emerging sunlight caught in her hair, and silently thanked the universe for that stormy day and a borrowed umbrella. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of professionalism and barely concealed attraction. Jamie's project consumed my days and haunted my nights. I found myself spending far more time on her designs than any other clients, agonizing over every detail to ensure perfection. Our meetings became longer, more frequent. What started as quick consultations over coffee stretched into lengthy discussions over lunch, then dinner. Each time I told myself it was purely professional, but the way my heart raced when she entered the room told a different story. One evening, as the sun dipped below the Irvine skyline, casting a warm glow through my office windows, Jamie arrived for our scheduled meeting. She looked stunning in a fitted blazer and pencil skirt, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders. "Ready to tackle the lighting plan?" she asked, dropping a stack of catalogs on my desk. I nodded, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened at her proximity. "Let's do it." Hours ticked by as we pored over options, debating the merits of pendant lights versus track lighting. Our heads bent close together over the blueprints. I could smell her perfume, a subtle, intoxicating scent that made it hard to concentrate. "What do you think about these for the main space?" Jamie asked, pointing to a sleek, modern fixture. As I leaned in to get a better look, our hands brushed. a jolt of electricity shot through me, and I jerked back, knocking over my glass of water. "Shit," I exclaimed, scrambling to save the drawings. Jamie jumped up, grabbing tissues to mop up the spill. "It's okay, we caught it in time," she reassured me, her hand resting briefly on my arm. I looked up, our faces inches apart. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. I could see flecks of gray in her blue eyes, the slight part of her lips. The urge to kiss her was overwhelming. Clearing my throat, I stepped back. "Thanks for the help. Maybe we should call it a night?" A flicker of something... disappointment? Crossed Jamie's face before she nodded. "You're right, it's late. Same time tomorrow?" As I watched her leave, I slumped into my chair, running a hand through my hair. This was getting dangerous. I needed to get a grip. The next day, I confided in my best friend Lana. We met for lunch at our favorite bistro, and I spilled everything. "Lana, I'm in trouble," I admitted, pushing my salad around my plate. "I can't stop thinking about her." Lana raised an eyebrow. "The client? Charlotte, you know that's a bad idea." I sighed. I know, but there's just something about her. It's not just physical attraction. We connect on so many levels." "Have you considered that maybe you're just caught up in the project?" Lana suggested gently. "You've always been passionate about your work." I shook my head. "It's more than that. When we're together, it's like everything else fades away." "I've never felt this way before." Lana reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Just be careful, okay? I don't want to see you get hurt." I nodded, grateful for her concern. But as I returned to the office, I knew her words wouldn't be enough to quell the growing feelings in my heart. That night, a sudden thunderstorm rolled in, rattling the windows of my office. Jamie and I were working late again, finalizing the plans for her studio's layout. "Looks like we might be stuck here for a while," Jamie observed, peering out at the downpour. I tried to ignore the thrill that ran through me at the thought of being alone with her. "I've got some wine in the mini-fridge," I offered. "We could take a break, wait out the storm?" Jamie's eyes lit up. "Now you're talking." We settled onto the small couch in my office, glasses in hand. As the storm raged outside, our conversation flowed easily, moving from work to our personal lives. I learned about her childhood in California, her passion for art that led her to interior design. In turn, I shared stories of my own journey into architecture. As the night wore on and the wine dwindled, I found myself hyper-aware of Jamie's proximity. Her knee brushed against mine as she laughed at one of my jokes, and I felt that familiar spark. "You know," Jamie said softly, her eyes meeting mine. "I'm really glad it was your umbrella I borrowed that day." Before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in. Our lips met in a soft, tentative kiss that quickly deepened. Jamie's hand came up to cup my cheek, and I melted into her touch. When we finally parted, breathless, reality came crashing back. "Oh God," I whispered, the implications of what we'd done hitting me. "Jamie, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have." She pressed a finger to my lips, silencing me. "Don't apologize," she said firmly. "I wanted that too." As we sat there, the storm subsiding outside, I knew we'd crossed a line. What had started as a simple act of kindness with a borrowed umbrella had led us here to the precipice of something thrilling and terrifying. The question was, were we ready to take the plunge? The days following our kiss were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Jamie and I tried to maintain a veneer of professionalism, but the air between us crackled with unresolved tension. Every accidental touch, every lingering glance, sent shivers down my spine. I found myself simultaneously dreading and anticipating our meetings. One afternoon, as we pored over material samples in my office, Jamie's hand brushed mine. She jerked back as if burned, knocking over a stack of blueprints. "I'm sorry," she muttered, avoiding my eyes as she bent to gather the scattered papers. I knelt beside her, our heads nearly touching. "Jamie," I said softly, "we need to talk about this." She looked up, her blue eyes stormy with confusion. "I know, but I don't know what to say." Before I could respond, my assistant knocked on the door, announcing my next appointment. Jamie seized the opportunity to make a hasty exit, leaving me surrounded by fallen papers and unanswered questions. That night, I called Lana in a panic. "I kissed her," I blurted out as soon as she answered. "You what?" Lana's voice was a mix of shock and concern. "Charlotte, what were you thinking?" I groaned, flopping onto my couch. "I wasn't thinking, that's the problem. It just happened." Lana sighed. "And now?" "Now everything's awkward and complicated," I admitted. "I don't know what to do, Lana. I can't stop thinking about her, but she's my client. This could ruin everything." "You need to set clear boundaries," Lana advised. "For both your sakes. Finish the project, then see where things stand." I knew she was right, but the thought of distancing myself from Jamie made my chest ache. "I'll try," I promised, though I wasn't sure I had the strength to follow through. The next few weeks were an exercise in restraint. Jamie and I kept our interactions strictly professional, but the undercurrent of attraction remained. I caught her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, her gaze filled with longing that mirrored my own. As we neared a crucial milestone in the project, we found ourselves working late into the night more often. One evening, as a summer thunderstorm raged outside, we huddled over my desk, reviewing the final plans for the studio's layout. "If we move this wall here," Jamie suggested, leaning close to point at the blueprint, "we could create a more open flow between the workspaces." I nodded, hyper-aware of her proximity. "Good idea. Let me sketch that out." As I reached for my pencil, a clap of thunder shook the building. The lights flickered once, twice, then plunged us into darkness. "Gosh," Jamie gasped, her hand finding my arm in the dark. "That was close." I fumbled for my phone, switching on the flashlight. In the harsh glow, I could see the nervousness on Jamie's face. "It's okay," I reassured her. "The storm will pass soon." We sat in tense silence, listening to the rain lash against the windows. The darkness seemed to amplify every sensation. The warmth of Jamie's hand still on my arm, the sound of her slightly quickened breathing. "Charlotte," Jamie said softly, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I can't keep pretending." I turned to face her, our faces illuminated by the dim light of my phone. "Pretending what?" "That I don't feel something for you," she whispered. "That kiss, it wasn't a mistake, at least not for me." My heart thundered in my chest, drowning out even the storm outside. "Jamie, Before I could finish, she closed the distance between us, pressing her lips to mine. Unlike our first kiss, tentative and wine-softened, this one was urgent, filled with weeks of pent-up longing. My hands tangled in her hair as she pulled me closer, deepening the kiss. When we finally broke apart, breathless, the lights flickered back to life. Reality crashed back in, harsh and unforgiving under the fluorescent glare. "Oh God," Jamie murmured, stepping back. "I shouldn't have done that. You're my architect, this is so unprofessional." I reached for her, but she shook her head, gathering her things. "I'm sorry, Charlotte, I need to go." As the door closed behind her, I slumped into my chair, my head spinning. The taste of her lips lingered, a bittersweet reminder of what I couldn't have. The next morning, I woke to a text from Jamie. "I think we need some space to refocus on the project. Let's communicate via email for the next week." My heart sank as I read her words. She was right, of course. We needed to maintain professional boundaries. But the thought of not seeing her, not hearing her voice or seeing her smile, felt like physical pain. As I dressed for work, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. My brunette hair was a mess, and there were dark circles under my green eyes. I looked as conflicted as I felt. "Get it together, Charlotte," I muttered to my reflection. "She's just a client. You can do this." But even as I said the words, I knew they were a lie. Jamie Coleman was far more than just a client. She had become the blueprint for everything I wanted, everything I feared I couldn't have. As I headed to the office, steeling myself for a week without Jamie, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The lines we'd so carefully drawn were blurring, and I was powerless to stop it. All I could do was hold on and hope that when the dust settled, we'd both still be standing. The week of email-only communication crawled by at an excruciating pace. Every ping from my inbox sent my heart racing, hoping it was Jamie, only to be disappointed by routine work correspondence. When we finally met again, the tension between us was palpable. "The contractor has some concerns about the load-bearing wall," Jamie said, her voice clipped and professional as she spread out the blueprints on my desk. I nodded, trying to focus on the plans and not on the way her hair caught the sunlight. "Let's take a look." We worked in stilted silence, The easy rapport we'd once shared buried under layers of unspoken feelings and professional propriety. As the meeting drew to a close, I couldn't take it anymore. "Jamie," I said softly, "are we okay?" She paused, her hand on the doorknob. "We're fine, Charlotte. Let's just focus on the project, okay?" I watched her leave, a heaviness settling in my chest. This was for the best, I told myself. We needed to maintain boundaries. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. 2 weeks later, we reached a significant milestone in the project. The basic structure of Jamie's studio was complete, and we were ready to start on the interior. It felt like a moment worth celebrating. "We should mark the occasion," I suggested tentatively as we stood in the half-finished space, surrounded by the promise of what was to come. Jamie hesitated, then nodded. "You're right. One drink couldn't hurt." We ended up at a small wine bar near the construction site, tucked into a cozy booth. As the wine flowed, so did our conversation. The awkwardness of the past weeks melted away, replaced by the easy chemistry we'd always shared. "I've missed this," Jamie admitted, her cheeks flushed from the wine. "Missed you." I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with alcohol spreading through me. "Me too." As the bar began to empty, we realized how late it had gotten. "We should probably call it a night," I said reluctantly. Jamie nodded, but made no move to leave. Instead, she leaned closer, her eyes locked on mine. "Or we could have one more drink. At my place." My breath caught in my throat. "Jamie, are you sure that's a good idea?" She smiled, a mix of nervousness and determination in her eyes. "Probably not, but I'm tired of pretending I don't want this. Want you?" The ride to her apartment was charged with anticipation. As soon as her door closed behind us, Jamie turned to me, her eyes dark with desire. "Charlotte," she breathed. And then we were kissing. It was like a dam breaking. All the pent-up longing, the weeks of restraint, came pouring out. My hands tangled in her hair as she pressed me against the wall, her body flush against mine. What followed was a blur of sensation, the softness of her skin, the taste of wine on her lips, the sound of her breath catching as I trailed kisses down her neck. We stumbled to her bedroom, shedding clothes along the way. In the pale moonlight filtering through her curtains, Jamie was breathtaking. I took my time exploring every curve, every freckle, committing it all to memory. When we finally came together, it was with a passion that left us both breathless and trembling. Afterward, as we lay tangled in her sheets, reality began to creep back in. "Oh God," I murmured, the full weight of what we'd done hitting me. "Jamie, what have we done?" She propped herself up on one elbow, her blonde hair tousled and her blue eyes serious. "Something we've both wanted for a long time," she said softly. "Unless. Do you regret it?" I shook my head, reaching out to cup her cheek. "No, I don't regret it, but this complicates things." Jamie sighed, snuggling closer to me. "I know, but can we just not think about that right now? Can we just have this moment?" I nodded, pulling her close and breathing in the scent of her hair. As sleep began to claim me, I pushed away thoughts of professional ethics and client relationships. Tomorrow would bring complications, but for now, I allowed myself to simply be happy. Morning came too soon, sunlight streaming through the windows and forcing us to confront the reality of our situation. I woke first, momentarily disoriented before the events of the night before came rushing back. Jamie was still asleep, her face peaceful, one arm draped across my waist. As I watched her sleep, a mix of emotions swirled through me. Joy at finally being with her, fear of the consequences, and an overwhelming tenderness that scared me with its intensity. Jamie stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment she looked confused, then a slow smile spread across her face. "Good morning," she murmured, leaning in for a kiss. I returned the kiss but pulled back before it could deepen. "Jamie, we need to talk about this." Her smile faded, replaced by a look of apprehension. "I know," she sighed, sitting up and pulling the sheet around her. "What are we going to do?" I ran a hand through my hair, trying to gather my thoughts. "I don't know. What happened between us, it was amazing. But you're my client. There are ethical considerations." Jamie nodded, her expression torn. "I understand. But Charlotte, I can't pretend this didn't happen. I can't go back to just being your client." "I can't either," I admitted. "But we need to figure out how to handle this professionally. Maybe we should bring in another architect to oversee the project? Is that what you want?" Jamie asked, her voice small. I reached for her hand, intertwining our fingers. What I want is you, but I also want to do this right. We need to think this through. As we sat there, the morning sun warming the room, I realized we were at a crossroads. Whatever decision we made would change everything, our professional relationship, our personal lives, perhaps even our careers. The path forward was unclear, fraught with potential pitfalls. But looking at Jamie, seeing the mix of hope and fear in her eyes that I knew was mirrored in my own, I knew one thing for certain: whatever challenges lay ahead, I wanted to face them with her. The weeks following our night together were a delicate balancing act. Jamie and I agreed to keep things professional during work hours, but the stolen glances and lingering touches told a different story. Every meeting was charged with unspoken desire, making it increasingly difficult to focus on the task at hand. One afternoon, as we reviewed fabric swatches for the studio's seating area, Jamie's hand brushed mine. The familiar spark of electricity shot through me, and I pulled away abruptly, knocking over a stack of samples. "I'm sorry," I muttered, bending to gather the scattered swatches. Jamie knelt beside me, her voice low. "Charlotte, we can't keep doing this. It's affecting our work." I sighed, meeting her eyes. "I know, but I don't know how to stop feeling this way about you." Before she could respond, my assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Davis, your 3 o'clock is here." Jamie stood quickly, smoothing her skirt. "I should go. We'll continue this discussion later." As she left, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. We were walking a dangerous line, and something had to give. That evening, I met Lana for drinks, desperate for some advice. As soon as I sat down, she raised an eyebrow at me. "Spill it, Charlotte. What's going on?" I took a long sip of my wine before answering. "Jamie and we slept together." Lana's eyes widened. "Charlotte, what were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking," I admitted. "It just happened. And now, gosh, Lana, I think I'm falling in love with her." Lana reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Oh, honey, this is messy. What are you going to do?" I shook my head, fighting back tears. "I don't know. We're trying to keep things professional, but it's so hard. Every time I see her, I just want to." "I get it," Lana interrupted, holding up a hand. "But you need to be careful. This could seriously impact your career if it gets out." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from one of my other clients, canceling our upcoming meeting. It was the third cancellation this week. A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I realized the implications. "Lana," I said slowly, "I think people are starting to talk." The next day, my fears were confirmed. I overheard two of my colleagues whispering in the break room, their voices carrying just enough for me to catch snippets of their conversation. "Seen how she looks at that client? Unprofessional. Wonder if she's done this before." I felt my cheeks burn with shame and anger. Is this what people thought of me now? That I was some predatory architect who couldn't keep things professional? When Jamie arrived for our scheduled meeting that afternoon, I was a bundle of nerves. She must have sensed my mood because her brow furrowed with concern. "Charlotte, is everything okay?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Jamie, I think we need to take a step back. People are starting to talk and it's affecting my other work." Her face fell, a mix of hurt and understanding in her eyes. "I see. So what does that mean for us?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But for now, I think we should limit our interactions to strictly necessary meetings. Maybe bring in another architect to oversee some aspects of the project." Jamie nodded slowly, her voice tight. "If that's what you think is best." As she left my office, I felt a piece of my heart go with her. But I knew it was necessary. We had to protect ourselves, our careers, and the project we'd worked so hard on. The next few weeks were torture. Jamie and I communicated mostly through email and brief, formal meetings. The spark between us was still there, but muted, buried under layers of professionalism and forced distance. One afternoon, as I was presenting our progress to a group of investors, I noticed one of them eyeing me with open disdain. After the meeting, he cornered me in the hallway. "Ms. Davis," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "I hope you understand that we expect a certain level of propriety in our business dealings." I felt my face flush with anger. "I assure you, sir, that my work is always of the highest professional standard." He raised an eyebrow. "See that it stays that way. We wouldn't want any." personal entanglements to jeopardize this project. As he walked away, I leaned against the wall, fighting back tears of frustration. How had things gotten so complicated? That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the half-finished designs for Jamie's studio, I felt a wave of loneliness wash over me. I missed her, not just physically, but the easy companionship we'd shared, the way she challenged and inspired me professionally. Before I could talk myself out of it, I picked up my phone and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. "Charlotte? I miss you," I blurted out. "I know we agreed to keep our distance, but Jamie, I can't stop thinking about you." There was a long pause, and for a moment, I feared I'd made a terrible mistake. Then softly, "I miss you too." We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. As the sun began to rise, casting a soft glow through my window, I felt a renewed sense of determination. "Jamie," I said, my voice firm, "I don't want to hide anymore. I don't care what people say or think. You're worth fighting for." I could hear the smile in her voice as she replied, "So are you, Charlotte, so are you." As I hung up the phone, I knew we still had a long way to go. There would be challenges ahead, professional, personal, and everything in between. But for the first time in weeks, I felt hope. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The morning after our late-night phone call, I walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. Jamie and I had agreed to meet for lunch to discuss our situation face-to-face. As I settled at my desk, my assistant, Sarah, knocked on the door. "Ms. Davis, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." I looked up to see a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. My heart sank as I recognized him. Robert Caldwell, one of the most prominent architects in Irvine. "Charlotte Davis," he said, his voice smooth as he extended his hand. "I've heard a lot about you lately." I shook his hand, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Mr. Caldwell, what can I do for you?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here about the Coleman project. I understand you've been having some difficulties." My blood ran cold. "I'm not sure what you mean. The project is progressing well." Caldwell raised an eyebrow. "Come now, Charlotte, we both know that's not entirely true. There have been whispers about your relationship with the client." I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. "My personal life is none of your concern, Mr. Caldwell." He leaned forward, his voice low. "It is when it affects the reputation of our profession. I'm here to offer you a way out. Let my firm take over the Coleman project. We'll ensure a smooth transition, and this whole, messy situation can be forgotten." For a moment, I was tempted. It would be so easy to step away, to avoid the scrutiny and judgment. But then I thought of Jamie, of the passion we shared for this project and for each other. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Caldwell," I said, my voice steady. "But I won't be stepping away from this project. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." He stood, his expression hardening. "You're making a mistake, Charlotte. This won't end well for you." As he left, I slumped in my chair, my heart racing. What had I just done? When lunchtime arrived, I met Jamie at a small cafe a few blocks from the office. As soon as I saw her, some of my anxiety melted away. She looked beautiful, her blonde hair catching the sunlight. "Charlotte," she said, her blue eyes filled with concern. "What's wrong? You look upset." I took a deep breath and told her about Caldwell's visit. As I spoke, I saw a range of emotions flicker across her face: anger, fear, and finally, determination. "That bastard," she muttered. "Who does he think he is?" I reached across the table, taking her hand. "Jamie, I need you to know," I turned him down, "I won't give up this project or you." She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. "Thank you. But Charlotte, are you sure? This could seriously impact your career." I nodded, feeling more certain than ever. "I'm sure. You're worth it, we're worth it." As we finished our lunch, planning our next steps, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. But life, as always, had other plans. The next morning, I arrived at the construction site for Jamie's studio to find it in chaos. Workers were milling about, looking confused, and there was no sign of the project manager. "What's going on?" I demanded, approaching one of the foremen. He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "We got word this morning to halt all work. Something about a permit issue?" My stomach dropped. This had Caldwell written all over it. I pulled out my phone to call Jamie, but before I could dial, I saw her car pull up. She rushed over, her face pale. "Charlotte, did you hear? They're saying there are problems with the building permits. But that's impossible. We checked everything." I put a reassuring hand on her arm. "It's okay. We'll figure this out. Let me make some calls." The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and meetings. It quickly became clear that someone and I had a good idea who had raised questions about the validity of our permits. It was a baseless claim, but it would take time to sort out. As the day wore on, I could see the toll it was taking on Jamie. She paced back and forth in my office, her usual confidence shaken. "This is my dream, Charlotte," she said, her voice breaking. "Everything I've worked for. What if it all falls apart?" I stood, pulling her into a hug. "It won't. I promise you, we'll fix this." As I held her, I felt a surge of protectiveness. I had gotten us into this mess, and I would get us out. That evening, after Jamie had gone home, I stayed late at the office, poring over every document related to the project. There had to be something I was missing, some way to prove that our permits were in order. As I rifled through a stack of papers, a small business card fell out. I picked it up, squinting at the faded print. It was the contact information for an old colleague who now worked in the city's planning department. With a surge of hope, I dialed the number. "Mike, it's Charlotte Davis. I need your help." What followed was a long night of digging through records and calling in favors. By the time the sun rose, I had what I needed: irrefutable proof that our permits were valid and that someone had deliberately misled the inspection office. I was exhausted but exhilarated as I drove to Jamie's apartment. When she opened the door, her eyes widened at my disheveled appearance. "Charlotte? What's going on?" I held up the file in my hand, grinning. "We've got them, Jamie. I can prove that Caldwell tried to sabotage our project." Her face lit up, and before I knew it, she'd pulled me into a passionate kiss. As we broke apart, both breathless, she whispered, "My hero." Later that day, as we presented our evidence to the city officials, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. Caldwell's plan had backfired spectacularly, and now he was the one facing scrutiny. As we left City Hall, permits reinstated and construction cleared to resume, Jamie turned to me. "I can't believe you did all that for me." I took her hand, not caring who might see. "I'd do anything for you, Jamie. I love you." The words slipped out before I could stop them, but as soon as I said them, I knew they were true. Jamie's eyes widened, then softened. "I love you too, Charlotte." As we kissed there on the steps of City Hall, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The road hadn't been easy, but standing there with Jamie, I knew it had all been worth it. The weeks following our victory over Caldwell were a whirlwind of activity. With the permit issues resolved, construction on Jamie's studio resumed at full speed. We threw ourselves into the project, determined to make up for lost time. But even as we focused on work, the shift in our relationship was undeniable. The love we'd confessed outside City Hall colored every interaction, every shared glance. We were no longer just architect and client, or even just lovers. We were partners in every sense of the word. One evening, as we stood in the half-finished studio space, surrounded by the skeleton of Jamie's dream, she turned to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "You know, we never properly celebrated our win over Caldwell," she said, pulling me close. I raised an eyebrow, my heart rate quickening. "Oh, and what did you have in mind?" Her answer came in the form of a passionate kiss that left me breathless. As we made love amidst the scaffolding and drop cloths, I marveled at how far we'd come. From that first rainy day with a borrowed umbrella to this moment, our journey had been anything but straightforward. But as Jamie's hands traced my body with reverence, I knew I wouldn't change a thing. Afterward, as we lay tangled together on a makeshift bed of packing blankets, Jamie propped herself up on one elbow, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulder. "Charlotte," she said, her voice serious, "I've been thinking, when this project is done, what happens to us?" I felt a flutter of anxiety in my chest. It was a question I'd been avoiding, afraid of the answer. "What do you want to happen?" She took a deep breath. "I want us to be together, really together. No more hiding, no more worrying about what people might think." Relief washed over me. "Jamie, that's all I want too. But are you sure? There might be consequences, professionally speaking." She nodded. her blue eyes determined. "I'm sure. You're worth any risk." As we kissed again, sealing our commitment, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. The next morning, as I walked into my office, I was met with curious glances and hushed whispers. It seemed our relationship wasn't as secret as we'd thought. Taking a deep breath, I called a staff meeting. Standing before my team, I felt a mix of nervousness and resolve. "I'm sure many of you have heard rumors about my personal life," I began. "I want to address them directly. Yes, I am in a relationship with Jamie Coleman. Yes, she is a client. But I want to assure you all that our personal relationship has not and will not compromise the integrity of our work." The room was silent for a moment, then Sarah, my assistant, spoke up. "Ms. Davis, Charlotte, we've all seen how happy you've been lately. And the Coleman project is some of your best work yet. As long as you're happy and the work is good, that's all that matters to us." Tears pricked my eyes as murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. I'd been so afraid of judgment, but here was acceptance and support. As the meeting dispersed, Lana caught my eye from the back of the room. She gave me a thumbs up and mouthed, "Proud of you." With the air cleared at work, Jamie and I felt free to be more open about our relationship. We started attending industry events together, no longer hiding our connection. Sure, there were some raised eyebrows and whispered comments, but for every skeptic, there seemed to be someone who admired our courage. As the completion date for Jamie's studio drew near, we found ourselves working longer hours, determined to make every detail perfect. One night, as we pored over the final design choices, Jamie suddenly stood up. "Let's get out of here," she said, tugging me to my feet. "What?" "Jamie, we have so much to finish." She silenced me with a kiss. "It can wait. I want to show you something." Intrigued, I let her lead me out of the office and into her car. We drove through the night, the city lights fading behind us. Finally, we pulled up to a secluded beach. Hand in hand, we walked along the moonlit shore. The sound of waves crashing against the sand filled the air, a soothing rhythm after weeks of construction noise. "I used to come here when I needed to clear my head," Jamie said softly, "to remind myself of why I became a designer in the first place. I wanted to create spaces that made people feel the way this beach makes me feel, peaceful, inspired, alive." I squeezed her hand, understanding completely. "It's beautiful, Jamie." She turned to face me, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "Charlotte, working with you on this project, it's been more than I ever dreamed. You've helped me create something amazing. But more than that, you've shown me what it means to truly collaborate, to share a vision." My heart swelled with emotion. "Jamie, But she wasn't finished. Taking both my hands in hers, she continued, "I don't want it to end when the studio is finished. I want to keep creating with you, living with you, loving you. Charlotte Davis, will you marry me?" For a moment, I couldn't speak, overcome by surprise and joy. Then, laughing through my tears, I pulled her close. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." As we kissed, the waves lapping at our feet, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here. From architect and client to lovers to fiancés. It had been a winding path, full of obstacles and unexpected turns. But standing there on that moonlit beach, Jamie in my arms and a future full of promise stretching out before us, I knew that every step had been worth it. As we drove back to the city, hands clasped tightly together, I couldn't help but smile. We still had challenges ahead, finishing the studio, planning a wedding, navigating the complexities of merging our personal and professional lives. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the future. With Jamie by my side, I was ready for anything. The day of the studio's grand opening arrived with a flurry of excitement and nervous energy. Jamie and I had poured our hearts and souls into this project, and now it was time to share it with the world. As we stood outside the beautifully renovated building, hand in hand, I couldn't help but marvel at how far we'd come. "Ready?" I asked, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. Jamie took a deep breath, her blue eyes sparkling with anticipation. "As I'll ever be, let's do this." As the doors opened and guests began to pour in, I watched Jamie work the room with grace and charm. She was in her element, describing her vision and pointing out the intricate details we'd labored over for months. I hung back, content to let her shine, my chest swelling with pride. Lana sidled up to me, champagne flute in hand. "You two did good, kid," she said, nudging my shoulder. "This place is incredible." I smiled, my eyes never leaving Jamie. Thanks, Lana. I still can't believe we pulled it off. As the evening wore on, I found myself drawn into conversations with various industry professionals. Many were curious about our unconventional partnership, but to my surprise, the overall response was positive. One veteran designer even pulled me aside to commend our bravery. It's not often you see true collaboration like this, she said, her eyes twinkling. You and Jamie have created something special here, and I'm not just talking about the studio. As the crowd thinned and the last of the guests departed, Jamie and I found ourselves alone in the space we'd created together. The soft lighting cast a warm glow over the carefully curated furnishings and artwork, making the studio feel like a living, breathing entity. We did it, Jamie whispered, her voice filled with awe. It's even better than I imagined. I wrapped my arms around her waist, pulling her close. You did it, Jamie. This is your vision come to life. She turned in my embrace, her expression serious. No, Charlotte, we did this, together. I couldn't have done it without you. As we kissed, surrounded by the fruits of our labor, I felt a sense of completion I'd never experienced before. But little did I know, our journey was far from over. The success of Jamie's studio brought us more attention than we'd anticipated. Offers for joint projects began pouring in, each more exciting than the last. We found ourselves at a crossroads, faced with the opportunity to expand our collaboration beyond our wildest dreams. One evening, as we sat in our favorite coffee shop, the very one where we'd first met, Jamie slid a folder across the table to me. What's this? I asked, opening it curiously. Our future, she replied, her eyes dancing with excitement. Charlotte, what would you say to starting our own firm? A true merger of architecture and interior design, with us at the helm? I stared at the business plan she'd drafted, my mind racing. It was ambitious, risky even. But as I looked up at Jamie, seeing the passion and determination in her eyes, I knew my answer. Let's do it, I said, grinning. Davis & Coleman Designs has a nice ring to it, don't you think? The months that followed were a whirlwind of activity. We threw ourselves into establishing our new firm with the same fervor we'd applied to Jamie's studio. There were late nights, heated debates, and moments of doubt. But through it all, our bond only grew stronger. As we prepared for the launch of our first joint project, a sustainable mixed-use development that pushed the boundaries of eco-friendly design, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected path that had led us here. The night before the project unveiling, Jamie and I stood on the balcony of our new home, overlooking the city we were helping to shape. She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. Can you believe it's been 2 years since that rainy day with the umbrella? She mused. I chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Feels like a lifetime ago. And also like yesterday. Jamie turned to face me, her expression suddenly serious. Charlotte, there's something I need to tell you. My heart skipped a beat. What is it? She took a deep breath, then broke into a radiant smile. I'm pregnant. For a moment, I couldn't speak, overwhelmed by a rush of emotions. Then, laughing through tears of joy, I pulled her into a tight embrace. Oh my gosh, Jamie. That's amazing. As we stood there, holding each other close and dreaming of the future, I marveled at the twists and turns that had brought us to this moment, from architect and client to partners in love and business, and now soon to be parents. Our story had been anything but conventional, filled with challenges and unexpected detours. But standing there with Jamie, our unborn child growing between us and a city full of possibility spread out before us, I knew that every step had led us exactly where we were meant to be. The next morning, as we prepared to unveil our project to the world, Jamie squeezed my hand. Ready for our next big adventure? She asked, her eyes shining with love and excitement. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace and certainty wash over me. With you? Always. As we stepped out to face the crowd of eager investors and journalists, I realized that this wasn't just the start of a new project. It was the beginning of a whole new chapter in our lives, one filled with love, creativity, and endless possibilities. And I couldn't wait to see where it would take us next. The blueprints of our lives had been redrawn in ways we never could have imagined that rainy day 2 years ago. But as I looked at Jamie, her hand protectively cradling her stomach as she confidently addressed the audience, I knew that the most beautiful designs were yet to come. Our love story, like the buildings we created together, was a work in progress, ever evolving, always surprising, and more magnificent than we could have ever dreamed.